Brilliant. Thank you. Number 2, we welcome the use of the Welsh language at the public meetings. I have not received notice that members or invitees wish to use Welsh today. Therefore, the meeting will be conducted in English only. Thank you. Right. Say good afternoon to the Resources and Corporate Business Overall Scrutiny meeting today. Agenda item number 1 will be apologies.
Apologies received on Councillor Giles Davis and Hugh Bevan.
Item number 2 on the agenda is declarations of interest. Members, hand over to our usual.
Thank you, Chair. Item 7 on the agenda, members, is the small schemes, which I think is just for noting. In respect of those members whose donations are listed at agenda item 7, then normally that would be a prejudicial interest, but because of a dispensation from the Ethics and Standards Committee, what is required in those circumstances is for you simply to declare a personal interest, and you can then take part in the scrutiny activity. And I just need to check with the members affected that they're happy to proceed on that basis and declare a personal interest. And I think the members affected, firstly, yourself, Chair, your donations are mentioned, so are you happy to declare a personal interest in agenda item 7?
I'm happy to.
Thank you. And I think Councillor Barnett as well. Are you happy to declare a personal interest? Okay, Councillor Barnett. And I don't think any of the other members who are members of this committee and listed are actually here, so I think that's it, Chair. And other than that, just to remind members to record the declarations in the attendance register, please. Thank you.
I have to know.
Can I ask Tim a question, please? I've cast my eyes over these, and whilst I appreciate they are for noting, I noticed that there was one very large donation to the Mayor's charity appeal from member small schemes. Whilst I would, we would accept, and many members here have given the odd £50, £100 to the Mayor's charities. The donation of £1,000, 2/3 of the entirety of it doesn't strike me that it should be within the, it strikes me that beyond reason that small schemes money of that quantity should be donated to a charity. Is there anything within our legal constitution that you're aware of?
I'm not aware of anything, Councillor Karen, I'm afraid, so I can't really answer the point. It can only be noted in the minutes and perhaps investigated further, but I would have thought that those who administer the small schemes payments would be able to tell members whether what they were wishing to donate to any particular organisation or charity was within that scheme or not. It's not something I personally administer, so I don't know the answer, I'm afraid.
We will note that in the minutes and take it back to the appropriate officer, right?
Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Right. You've got the usual caveat here, which is you are welcome to stay. I gather from my previous conversation with you, you are business elsewhere.
Yes, thank you, Chair. Yeah, thank you.
Your assistance there. Right. Next item on the agenda is, where I can find it, as usual, minutes of the last meeting. So that's agenda item number 3. Page 3, let's look at it here to accuracy. Page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7. Can I have approval from member, please? Thank you very much. We'll go back over those items and have a look if there's anything rising from that. Page 3, page 4, page 5, page 6, and page 7. Obviously nothing caught your eye there last meeting. And then on to our old friend, the action sheet. Anybody got anything there? Any comments on that at all? Seems, it says currently no standing action, so sorry about that, members. I should read it more carefully in the future. Right, thank you. I know I should, yes, I wasn't reading that one. Okay, item number 5 on the agenda. I'll put over to Catherine here.
You will notice today, members, that we have 3 executive members sitting with us. I know this is slightly unusual, so the Chair's asked me if I could just explain to you all why they're here. As part of the Democratic Services Committee that was held on the 26th of April 2016, a recommendation came forward to all scrutiny committees that it would be beneficial for executive members to appear before committee at least once annually to review the progress of scrutiny recommendations. So they will continue working, but they will dip in if they feel necessary, or if there's anything specific that you wish to ask them, that they're here to answer your questions. And I have said to them, as I have officers, that if once their subject has been dealt with in the report and you've asked all of the questions, they're then welcome to leave. So I will point them in that direction when we get to the end of each subject and they're dealt with. Okay?
Okay, thank you there. The purpose of this afternoon's scrutiny, as we might be discussing the pre-scrutiny, was the suggested scrutiny activity is the scrutinising the impact, timescales and progress detailed in the resources and corporate business owner scrutiny recommendations update as attached to Appendix 1 to this report. And basically we've got a list of actions in Appendix 1. So what we're going to do is go through report action by action, so it's fairly logical, and we will call the appropriate officer and exec member as per report. But you can stay where you are, switch on the thing, and if yours is just one, there are obviously several of you who are going to be in for more than one of these. So I think you know who you are. And obviously Catherine will indicate if we just finish with it. And so we'll start with on page number 17, which is external funding, and that's Rob Wellington and, well, just Rob Wellington at the moment. We haven't got a substitute, have we, for the exec member? So you're going to handle that all by yourself. I'm sure you'll be happy with that. So the first set of questions here. Glyn Karen, can you kick off if you would, please?
Thank you, Chair. The recommendations were accepted at the time of receiving them, but not taken forward as they were not deemed a priority. Who decides if they are a priority, and shouldn't more thought be given at the time as to whether or not to accept or just consider until more information about priorities is known? Really what I'm thinking about is transparency. These were accepted recommendations, and they haven't gone anywhere for 3 years, and it does look as if, you know, it was like a nod and a wink. Yeah, we'll accept these recommendations, but really there's not a lot of chance of anything being done with them. And I know that sounds unfair, but I'm looking at this now as a member of the public, looking at this report.
So that, yeah, I can only agree with you. We've come back. This is the second time that we've come back since the first report was done. Last year, my answers to all of the suggested improvements are the same as they're going to be this year, and that is that nothing's gone forward because the improvements are reliant on support from the SRS board, and how that happens with us in Torfaen is we've got an ICT board that ranks improvements and work to be done, and basically we've kind of sat at about number 4 and just constantly got usurped. So I mean, it's outside of my, it's outside of my hands really. I don't sit on that ICT board. What we've said now, because as you just said, this is the second year that it's come back, is that maybe we need to look at either farming it out or actually taking the system in-house ourselves, because it's not just about the improvements that we talked about. It's also about maintaining the current system. Because of the nature of it, it needs changes constantly. You'll know there's elections soon, so executive members have got to be changed, and we're just not really getting any support at all from SRS. And I think that's down to that ICT board does look at the different things that are in the pipeline, and we've just not been prioritised.
Okay, anybody else want to come back on that one? Right, next question, number 2.
Thank you, Chair. Afternoon, Robert. No progress has been made on phase 2 of the external funding database due to it not being a high enough priority of the SRS. What impact, if any, has this had on your team?
I mean, the system that we've got at the moment, it works. It's embedded into the policy of the council. Officers, every pound of external funding that comes into the authority is mapped through the system. What we were hoping to do with phase 2 was to use the information that's within the system to better sort of guide an external funding strategy that we want to put together. But to do that, we need to be able to run reports off the system. Now, the system that it's currently sat on, it doesn't work very well, basically. It's really tedious to run reports. It basically has to be done manually. So I suppose it's twofold. It's working at the moment. In terms of what sort of effect it's had on the morale of the team, I think they would have liked us to take phase 2 forward, obviously, because it would have been a much better situation that we're in. We could have obviously guided this external funding strategy and looked at income generation as well. But the fact remains that it's there, it is working, it's just not working as well as we would have liked it to have worked.
Mary?
Yes, good afternoon. Can I come in on that? Because the Cabinet used to have a European funding subcommittee, and you attended, gave reports, etc., and embraced some of the other external funding. What mechanism is going to be in place to fully inform members now of the detrimental effects of Brexit on external funding? Because I'm personally still not sure of what are going to be the major losers in terms of service provision.
Thanks for that question, Mary. I'm not really sure what's going to be put in place, to be fair. I mean, it's not up to me to decide.
What funding we'll get from elsewhere. I mean, when are we going to be informed what we're going to lose, etc.?
I suppose that the mechanism for that would be through either a council report or a cabinet report to begin with. You're right, that committee doesn't meet anymore. It was a regional affairs and European funding committee. That's ceased meeting. So yeah, there's a gap there, I suppose, needs to be filled.
Yes, thank you, Chair. In this matter, what needs to be considered when deciding whether to go in-house or to outsource this function, and what time scale, over what time scale?
Thanks for that question. When we first developed the external funding database, there are actually bespoke packages that are on the market. There's a number of different companies that you can buy the package, and it's basically an ICT application that does what the external funding database does. The reason why we decided to do it in-house originally was because a couple of things. First of all, it's bespoke to a local authority rather than a private sector company, so we've got our own little quirks. Secondly, it was felt that at the time we'd have quick access. When there was a problem or something needed to be done with the system, things need to be fixed. The idea was that our own in-house ICT people would be easily accessible. Now, you're probably aware that with the SRS expanding all the time and their resources are limited, what that's actually done is put us in a position where they're not easily accessible. So, I mean, I suppose there's two things really. One, the cost of buying in a system, off-the-shelf system. Again, that would have to be looked at. And secondly, if we were to do it in-house, we were thinking of doing it within our own chief executive service. We've got a couple of staff that have got good ICT skills, and that would come down to their time and their availability as well. So I suppose there's a couple of things to look at really.
Any more want to come back at all on this? Right. Thank you very much. Is there anything more you want to add on this at all?
No.
All right. Thank you very much for that. The next area is information technology, and I've got Paul Higgs, Mike. Is it Dave?
Yeah, Paul is you, but Steve Jeans instead of Mike.
So it's Paul and Steve, leader. And we on the questions, pre-question, we didn't have anybody, but if any other members have got a burning question they want to put in. Do you want to add anything about the report up there at all? We were fairly content with it, I think, as it was. Is that okay? No, I think I say that because as it stood, we didn't have anything to add to that. So that's a positive, I think, in its own right. Thank you.
Do you want to look at other SRS things then, or go right through?
Well, we just go through in order, I think. We have other SRS stuff. Right, so we go to the next section. If I got to find my little things on it. It's channel shift, which is on 26. And the if you could go on that one, please, Steve.
Yes. I wonder could you. Oh, sorry. I wonder could you tell us when will the draft digital transformational strategy go live?
Yeah, thanks for the question. As it says obviously in the report, last year the draft was created. We felt that a digital transformation strategy really needs to fit into the wider organisation transformation activity that's going on. So I would anticipate that the digital transformation is absorbed into a wider transformation strategy as part of the Corporate Plan 3 activity.
The question was when. This is what we want to know. When is it going to happen? Even if the date that you pick out of the air is not likely to be the correct date, but we need something to hold on to here as to when this is going to happen, because that's why we've asked the question. When is it likely to occur?
Yeah, I'm unable to provide a date at the moment. I would anticipate it's very, very soon. I can't provide a date at the moment, unfortunately.
Right, okay. We'll say within 3 months, and that's what will bring it back here for any subsequent committee, and I think that's perhaps the best way that we can deal with it, really, isn't it?
Thank you, Steve. Anybody else? Nigel?
Yes, when you talk about how do you, when you say about with the transformation strategy that the digital is part of what working together with the other people to put that transformation strategy, what steps are being taken to bring it in terms of together with the wider transformation strategy?
Yeah, there is a lot of activity that is ongoing. We're not sort of sitting on our hands waiting for a strategy. There's a lot of activity that's going on across the Chief Executive Service. Our channel shift is very much driven around encouraging customers to self-serve. So you'll be aware that we're pushing, expanding our online services so customers don't have to contact us via telephone, via face-to-face channels that they can serve themselves using our app, using our website. So there's one element there, that's around the transformation of transactional services. Obviously the way we provide information is another important part of channel shift, so our activities with social media, our e-bulletins, our website, which has undergone a redesign this year to make it more responsive and more accessible. So there's lots of activity going on there, and there is also activity going on around what we call sort of failure demand or managing demand. So we're looking at those areas within council services that generate high levels of customer contact, and actually, as well as channel shift, actually can we find ways of avoiding the need for them to contact us in the first place. So it's across the council, activities are taking place, and they cross that element of transactions, services, and provision of information.
How will you know if the strategy is succeeding or not?
We've got a lot of measures already in place, particularly within chief executives. The most sort of visible one is around the percentage of people self-serving, so the percentage of people who need to raise an issue with the council who are doing so via our website or our app or via social media or email, so they're using online channels to contact us. That's an ongoing measure that Call to Vine or customer care and communications focus on. That's around 25 to 30%. The actual number of people contacting us on online channels is around 12%. So there's a slight difference there, because a lot of people contact us via telephone not to raise a service issue, but to be provided with information. So they may contact us to ask what their council tax balance is or when their next bin collection might be. So there's a difference between contact and actual contact that leads to a service. So where people contact us to request a service or report an issue, that's around 30% self-service. The overall level of contact is around 12%.
I'm surprised, Chair, that people still have to phone up to find out how to get the information. That does surprise me, considering that we do have plenty of customer service places, and also we've been banging on ad infinitum about all the different ways of contacting the council. And it does strike me that people are still ringing, that the people still feel that they have to ring up to find out how they can get in touch with, how they can find all these various things. That does surprise me.
Yeah, just in my own personal experience, I rarely would phone my own council, but I think as members, residents do like to phone them, and it's still very much the preferred channel of choice.
It's rather odd that people will ring up to find out where they can find out the place where they can get the information, rather than just ring up for the information.
I think when they do phone up, they are told perhaps by Call to Vine officers or via the messages on the call waiting that there are other ways of finding particular pieces of information. And we do put, as many of you know, we do put lots of information out online, which we're pretty confident does also reduce the amount of people contacting us.
Mary?
Question about communications, written or otherwise, at the moment. I'm pleased to see that the strategy will be overseen by a communications officer, and plain English is going to be the name of the game. You would expect that from an ex-English teacher. However, we have to recognise the various facets of communication, and sometimes plain is not enough. Technical language has to be used. So are you going to include then a glossary and possibly explanation of acronyms to help those when the subject is highly technical but obviously needs to be understood?
Yes, absolutely. And one of the key things about, particularly around the communications team, as many of you will be aware, it's not just about language, it's about design, it's about presentation, it's about the use of graphics, icons, things like that, which make things a lot easier for people to understand. We are very visual as well as wordy.
Any more questions, members? Nigel?
Again, to ask, is there a test to work out understandability, for whatever word? Is there a test to do you run a test to ensure that people do actually understand?
Yeah, we do use we'll continue to use the People's Panel, and that's a resource available to us where we can present them with draft documents and assess their, take feedback from them directly. So, yeah.
Any more? Anything you want to add? No, brilliant, thank you. Right, on to the next section, which is early departures, and that's Graham Russell, Deputy Leader. Glyn, yes, if you'd like to, sorry.
Thank you. This one's really about this issue about an analysis of why people are taking early departures. It was accepted at the time that we put it forward. we are taking the information, apparently, and keeping it on I4. However, you know, it says in the report, the broad rationale for such early departures is, however, understood, but there is insufficient analysis to provide empirical evidence for this. And then it says, and it's simply likely to endorse what is already understood as a reason why officers choose to leave early. I've been on joint scrutiny for quite some time. We often challenge the fact that we keep information that we don't really use. We are asking people why they choose to leave. We're choosing not to analyse it because we think we know why they're leaving in the first place. So, is there any point in asking the question and keeping that information on I4?
The simple answer is yes. The more considered answer is that since this recommendation came out, circumstances have changed again in terms of the profile of people leaving and why they leave. We have a process whereby when people leave the organisation, there is a termination form that is filled in, and that includes a section which indicates the reason why individuals have left. And of course, early departures can form a number of different component parts. It might be promotions elsewhere. It may be lifestyle changes. So it's important to sort of capture that and analyse that, because we need to understand with the workforce what it is that is perhaps enabling people to leave at an earlier stage. I think the other thing that's important to understand is that within the local government pension arrangements, it used to be that staff could only leave at the age of 60 without having employer consent. So any age before 60, they needed employer consent to be able to leave early. But of course, a couple of things have happened. The age has now changed, so it's now 55, so people can leave voluntarily and simply walk at an earlier age. And the government have introduced the Freedom and Choice initiative, which again means that people of the age of 55 can access their pension benefits at an earlier age than was ever the case before. So there are additional drivers which are influencing people's lifestyle choices. And I think it is important, I mean, I accept there is a limitation that we have not analysed the data to the extent we need to. But I think it is important to capture that data, to know and understand the reasons why people are leaving. Because I think in certain aspects, people are leaving because there has been an opportunity to get out. The pressures are increasing on people, and as they get older and they're finding it more difficult to balance work-life aspects, then they are making conscious lifestyle choices. And we have less influence over that now. So I think it is quite important, in fact even more important than ever, to capture the data. My only regret is that we've not yet been able to sufficiently analyse the data, and I do think that's something we still need to do.
Obviously, I picked up on this point because it does say, but has yet to be analysed due to competing priorities. And, you know, I accept what you say, and to a degree I agree with what you say. But I do think that you are correct. You know, I understand that there are always competing priorities, and I understand that there are less staff year on year to deal with those competing priorities. But I think it is important that we do fully understand why people are leaving the authority.
Mary?
Yes, can I come in on that as well, perhaps drawing on my experience as a former trade union representative, though not for this authority. Is there not a danger that sometimes we miss what is a very obvious underlying reason why people have left? Perhaps you might have picked up signs that that person is suffering from bullying, or there are life stresses that are impacting acting, perhaps an abusive relationship at home, that kind of thing. And early understanding and appreciation of the help that we could give to stop that would be beneficial, even if eventually the person decides to leave. Apart from anything else, it would mean we'd never be accused in an employment tribunal of not recognising some of those problems.
I think, through you, Chair, just a brief comment from me on that. I mean, I agree with the principle of what Councillor Barnett sets out there. We do try and capture or take the temperature through the employee survey in terms of levels of bullying. What we also do through my HR team is to try and get close to situations where staff do need support, not just because of work-related issues, but because of domestic issues as well. And we use the occupational health team as a support and as an advisor in order to help people try and maintain a balance. There's the confidential counselling advice service, those sorts of things. But we also try and be a little bit more flexible where we do get instances of people coming to us and saying, well, I can't keep doing what I was doing. Can I move to 4 days a week? And is that doable within the service context? And in some cases it is, and in other cases it's more problematic. And the ultimate extension of that is the potential for flexible retirement for people. So there's a number of things there where we try and support staff or manage what could be a cliff edge for them in terms of their change in circumstances. So we're trying to do a number of things in that area.
Reassuring answer.
I was minded that when we did this scrutiny, I mean, the external and the internal pressures we've got, obviously, we've got year-on-year staff reductions for various reasons. Obviously, people in the workforce, we were having a discussion earlier about the strains we've got with less people doing more work in the organisation, but also what Mary raised about the pressures on people domestically, things like caring roles, that sort of thing. I mean, that sounds what you've just described reasonable, but I mean, the pressures in the organisation, where we were talking about that earlier, where we've got some people who are highly skilled and they leave, we've got other people going in replacing them, that must be causing a strain for staff as well.
I think if I may comment on that, Chair, I think it's an important point because we're doing more analysis of the workforce and the profile of the workforce than we've ever done before in terms of things like gender split, age profile, etc. I'm not saying we're doing everything we can possibly do, but we're certainly doing more and we want to do more. But what that does identify is certain areas where the age profile, there is either a significant concentration around a particular age group. So it either means we've got too many people who potentially could walk out of the door tomorrow, or we're not bringing in enough people at the bottom end, or there's just a little focus group in the middle where we're fine at the moment, but in 15 years' time they could all leave on the same day. But what you do find in certain areas, and again it does partly come back to gender split, is that people are caught in the middle where they have responsibilities for a lower generation but also a higher generation in their own family. And that places pressure on individuals in their domestic circumstances, which when combined with the working environment, it's difficult to juggle. And so we do have to be mindful of that and try and support where we can.
Am I correct that this one will be coming back to scrutiny next time round?
In terms of
what you've just said,
what we're doing around
it's a rolling by the sound of it.
I think it's a really important issue that we need to understand the dynamics and the profile around the workforce, and that of course feeds into the workforce plan and what we need to prioritise within that workforce plan, which obviously went to Council at the end of February.
Would members like to say any more on this? Because I think we've what started as a simple thing. Would the exec member like to say anything on it at all? I'm conscious you haven't said it, had a go yet.
The exec member only took position in January for this portfolio, but just tad of a surprise today, but I think Graham has more than capably explained what we're doing. I myself am leaving employment somewhere in the not-too-distant future, and I've already got my exit interview booked, and they'll be asking me why I'm going, etc., etc., but that'll be down to the good people across the Caerleog North. But no, I've got nothing to add to Graham's remarks.
Thank you. Okay, next. Sorry. Next item on the next question is implement. And Phil, would you like to kick on the Welsh language one?
How long before we can expect to receive the compliance notice on the Welsh language?
Thank you for the question, Councillor Eborn. We had our compliance notice in September 2015. What we've been doing in the interim, though, is undertaking a appeal process with the Commissioner over some of the standards that we've challenged on the grounds of being reasonable and proportionate to the impact within Torfaen. That process is still ongoing, but we hope to be submitting a final response back to the Commissioner's office later this month. There is a report going to Cabinet on Tuesday with the Council's preferred position on the standards for the Commissioner to consider.
Thank you, Chair. I see in the report that we are having more people doing Welsh study. But do you feel that those training courses for staff actually add value? Because the feedback that we're getting as councillor is that even though they've been doing these Welsh language training courses for some years, they're still not confident enough to converse with the public in Welsh on a one-to-one basis.
Thank you for that, Councillor Karen. I think that there is a definite onus on the Council to be promoting the Welsh language within its workforce and providing those opportunities for people to learn and develop their Welsh language skills. It is true that some of the colleagues that we have going through the learning process with learning the Welsh language through the courses we provide, that they don't feel confident in using that in everyday use. You know, it is a complex language to get to grips with. What we hope to use those individuals for then is that if they're not confident in using those in the day-to-day activities or in speaking to people in Welsh, that they can turn their hand to doing some translation work within their own service areas on some of those translation requirements that we have. So they are a benefit. We are seeing a very small increase in the number of people wanting to take up the learning of the Welsh language provision, but it still leaves the Council with around about a 2% of Welsh language proficiency within the workforce.
If I could come back, Chair. I understand that there is pressure on the Council to run these courses from both the Welsh Language Commissioner and Welsh Government. What I don't want us to be, that is thought that we're doing, is ticking a box just to say we're training people in Welsh and we're not really doing a lot with it. And the other thing then, as a sort of follow-on to that, is have we thought about getting some of these people who've been doing this for a number of years to perhaps go away and do some immersion training where they go away somewhere and all they do is speak Welsh for a week?
Well, we hadn't considered the second part of your question there, Councillor Karen. The Council as a whole values the opportunity, I think, of trying to get its workforce Welsh language proficiency to a higher standard than what it is now, not just in terms of numbers, but also in terms of the qualitative element of that, of being able to do translation and bilingual translation. So it's a difficult road to follow in such that there is a requirement on us to provide it, excuse me, so we do. I think we have seen some of the benefits of certain individuals coming through that are far more proficient than others. But I think it would be a retrospective step back if we didn't provide the Welsh language training opportunities for our staff to continue with their own professional development.
Mary?
Yeah, can I say, obviously, there's a cost to the training, there's a cost to bilingualism generally, and I'm not knocking bilingualism, but do you think that the Welsh Government is likely to increase grant aid to help us with everything that we have to do, whether it's signage or whether, you know, it's providing written materials, etc., because it has become quite a burden?
In one word, no. We don't perceive to have any additional funding coming back to the local authority for the statutory requirements that's placed to it through the Welsh language measure and subsequently the standards. And that's been, excuse me, that's been part of our submission back through the standards that we are challenging around trying to minimise the financial impact whilst supporting the principles behind the standards and adopting those standards to be proportionate and reasonable to the requirements of Torfaen, that there is no additional external funding.
I think there needs to be discussions with, you know, Welsh Government officials on part of members of whatever party with this, because it's causing a great deal of concern.
Thank you, Chair. Could I ask, to implement the Welsh language to date, how much does it cost this council?
I don't have that figure, but I can try to identify the areas to which we've supported. I can get you the figures for the translation, because that sits within our service area and the amount of translation we do. But the subsidiary costs around staff time that goes into it and managerial time for supervising and so on, I can't put a hard figure on it, but I can give you a hard figure on translation costs.
Can I come back? Not to do with costs, but one of the issues that does worry me about what we are having to do as a local authority around the Welsh language is that there seems to be an inference that it may impact upon democracy, in the sense that the additional costs of translation for minutes and agendas, etc., and the additional costs that we have in other ways around the Welsh language could end up with us actually reducing the amount of committee meetings we have, actually reducing the amount of simply around this issue of translation costs. And it does worry me. Do you think the Welsh Government is aware that if these issues continue, in some areas of Wales there will be issues around democracy?
Presently, as a local authority in Torfaen, knowing the meeting schedule here, we are covering all the meetings that we need to cover with the translation within the Welsh language. So that's being covered within Torfaen, within the resources that we have. I can't speak on behalf of how other authorities are managing their processes, but it is a statutory requirement for the Council to comply with its notice that's come from the Commissioner's Office. We are compliant in the way that we provide bilingual agendas and minutes and other paperwork that's to do with the public meetings that are identified as requiring a Welsh language translation. So from a Torfaen perspective, Councillor Karen, I'm quite happy with the way in which we're currently meeting the demand of that service. But it would provide us with capacity issues if that changed in the future and if we lost any capacity within the Welsh language service.
What I'm looking at is the comments on page 37 that says the executive member with the responsibility for democracy is looking at the number of formal minuted meetings with a view to reducing the number and therefore the potential for numerous meetings being held bilingually that would have a significant cost for the council. Obviously, if we reduce the number of meetings, there are then issues about democracy in itself.
That hasn't happened in our case, Councillor Cowan. We are covering all the the requirements that we need to cover through Welsh language translation with the public meetings that we've needed to cover. So we are compliant with that part. We don't provide minutes and agendas for every council meeting. We provide minutes and agendas for those council public meetings that are open to the public.
Okay, any more on this? Did anybody else want to come in on this indication? Yes, I thought you did.
Chair, thank you. It was only to pick up really the point about the training and the value of the training. I mean, we know across our own workforce that we have a relatively small percentage who have the necessary skills in Welsh that we need. And whilst the training numbers are relatively low, I think part of the importance that we have, and this is where Lyndon and I join together in terms of the workforce and the Welsh language requirements, part of the challenge we face is that when people are starting to learn the language and building that knowledge, they're not then being required to go away and use it day by day. There is not that immediate requirement and not that immediate need. And so it's learning a little bit in isolation, which does create a challenge for us. So, you know, we are looking at ways at which perhaps we can address that, you know, more sensibly, but we don't have all the solutions to that at the moment. But we do recognise the issue in terms of how we need to try and address it.
Thank you, Chair. I was just going to sum up if that would be okay, but I noticed Councillor Seaborn has a question.
Thank you, Chair. Have you thought about sharing learning sessions with other agencies?
Someone's not off. I want to say, I mean, I sit on 2 school governing bodies, and I might have mentioned this several times before. I mean, it does look rather obvious to me that we've got lots of schools up and down the borough, and they use it on a daily basis. Intergenerational educational prospects of this one does seem to rather stare us in the face, and it's not the first time I've said that, but the schools and the further education thing would be the obvious place to go, because the way, I mean, I sit in my local school, Mary's sits in the same school as I do, they use a lot of Welsh there, and they do it day in, day out, all the time, and it does seem the obvious place to look at.
No problem. If I take both of those questions first with Councillor Seaborn in the opportunity of sharing practice and language. We've got a number of discussions going on with colleagues in Blaenau Gwent around how we can look at the sharing of the capacity within the Welsh language, both from a strategic Welsh language development standpoint, but also from an operational translation process, and those discussions are ongoing. So we see exactly the point Councillor Seaborn is making here on trying to increase the capacity within the public services that we have. So I can just assure the committee that work is ongoing. Secondly, in relation to schools, we've got 3 Welsh language primary schools and 1 secondary Welsh language school within the county borough, one very recently built down in the Sebastopol area, where we hope that through those schools, because it has to start from an educational standpoint to increase the physical numbers of Welsh speakers, that we will, in time, gain a workforce of more bilingual speakers. But just for the committee's attention, every summer, from the Welsh Language Secondary School, we employ one of the students there with a salary for the 6 weeks' time that they're off in school to work within the service area, in the hope that it will give them an opportunity to use Welsh language as part of their developing language skills within the service area to help with our translation activities.
I think Mary wants to come back quickly.
Yes. Do any of our officers actually go in and address the career aspirations of those students in the secondary Welsh school, or indeed in the Welsh University, the universities in Wales, and talk about potential careers in local government because it's not naturally the arena where most students think, oh, I really want to work in the finance department or the local government authority. They all want to be, you know, stockbrokers or etc. And particularly with planning, where Welsh planning laws are different from English, perhaps we ought to be really going out and being more proactive now on that careers advice and information front.
I mean, the other aspect is, I believe we do Welsh language play scheme as well, which is an obvious thing for people starting out in careers to go and do that when that's happening in the summer.
Yes, that's quite correct. There is a Welsh language play scheme. Our Welsh language officer does go to the secondary school to have discussions with the teachers there and the opportunities, not specifically career-based, because he's not a careers officer to such an extent, but certainly has the conversations around the opportunities for students to be placed within our environment for the time of developing a language. If I could just sum up, Chair, on some of the other parts, and just to give the meeting an understanding of where we are with the Welsh Language Commissioner's Office. So throughout this whole process, and certainly more recently, we've had a number of meetings with officers of the Commissioner's Office, and the Cabinet report that's going on Tuesday is our position statement, really, following those conversations of where we believe that the Welsh language standards should apply in Torfaen. For the Committee's attention, should that report be approved, the appendix will be submitted to the Commissioner's Office for consideration, and it is for consideration. It doesn't mean she has to agree with it. If it's agreed, then we will have a far better opportunity to implement all of the standards within our compliance notice. If it's not agreed, then the Council may want to consider entering into a legal tribunal.
Thank you very much for your contribution on that. Thank you everybody for that. Right, the next item, which is workforce planning this time. Graham Russell, Deputy Leader. And who's Nigel on this one? No, sorry. Yeah. Go on, Nigel.
Yes, thank you, Joe. In many ways, it's a follow-on from, it's on a more general, on an issue which has just been, and that's about the members feel that there are cross-cutting issues that could be shared as part of joint training courses across partner organisations. Have these been considered?
The answer.
Oh, sorry.
I'm on now. Right. Yes, they have, but we're starting to find some difficulties. There are certain areas where we can do such training, and one example is something called the All Wales Academy, which is an online training portal, whereby a lot of the authorities are getting together, paying a contribution to support this portal, this IT platform, and that has more generic types of training available on there. Ranging from certain things like time management to dealing with difficult people and those sorts of things. So that sort of thing works, although there have been some difficulties with getting access to that. So we are joining up and sharing development costs in some instances, and the All Wales Academy is a good example of that. But what we are finding equally is that some of our let's say, former employees who are now in bodies such as the EAS and Bronavon and Torfaen Leisure, those sorts of places. Those organisations are, whether we like it or not, it appears to me, wanting to become increasingly independent in terms of what they do, how they do it, how they arrange their training, and they want to be doing their own thing in some instances. So that makes it a little bit more difficult to join up the dots in that sense. So where we can, we do. But it isn't as straightforward as you might imagine in every respect. But we are taking opportunities where we can.
Yes, interesting you say about certain organisations, but about them trying to be independent, and yet the same organisations also come together with this council and other public organisations as part of the local service board.
Yeah.
So they want to be independent in that way, but then we got them together on the local service board. So it's a bit. So it seems to be rather a mixed message, because I thought that cooperation and partnership is the key, and suddenly we're being told, well, that's beside the point.
I think you summed it up quite well, Councillor.
Can I let Mary go, because I think she's on that line as well.
Yeah, as a caveat to that, we've talked about, working in collaboration with external partners, and I want to ask about working in collaboration with internal partners. I noticed that the union representative has said that on occasions they may be able to provide training by accessing funds that are not available to the council itself. Have we pursued that offer in any way, or examined it in more detail?
No, we haven't. I mean, one of the strengths we have, of course, is we have our own training arm, which is Torvine Training. And so we do an awful lot through them, who provide support and training expertise across the whole organisation. And certainly they do reach out to some of the other organisations in the local community as well. So there is some joining up there. In terms of trying to do explicit training with the trade unions, then I'm not sure that's ever really got off the ground, and I think part of that maybe there are a slightly different emphasis in terms of some of the training being provided. But it's not something we've really actively pursued, but is perhaps something we could look at in further detail.
Two questions, if I could. With hindsight, do you regret accepting this recommendation? And two, it strikes me that because we've got the training arm, we are offering Brynavon and Torvine Leisure Trust and EAS an opportunity to come to us. I wonder if perhaps, given the fact that we have now such a small education department, and EAS are basically a major player in the game in the whole of the Greater Gwent area, and to a degree the same thing with Brynavon. We have a very small housing department, and Brynavon is the major housing supplier for the whole of Torvine. Do you think that really we're looking at it through the wrong end of a telescope, that instead of inviting them to come to us, we should perhaps be turning around to the EAS and saying, if you're doing any training courses, are there any opportunities for our people to come and get involved in them?
I think the response to the first part of the question is, do I regret the recommendation or accepting the recommendation? Then the answer is very clearly no to that. Where we can, we need to be joining up and working with colleagues to provide training and development in the most efficient ways. That is easier for more generic types of training and certain types of general management training. Once you get into technicality type training, then that's where the paths will probably diverge in terms of what the training requirement is. So no, the acceptance of the recommendation was to also say where it's practical. And I suppose what I'm illustrating is that in certain areas where we've done online stuff, it has worked and it has been practical. In other areas, it's not proved as easy. I think your point about are we approaching it from the right end, i.e. us offering services to outside bodies, or should they be offering it to us, I think is a really good one. And I think both parties are, if you like, not totally comfortable yet in terms of how those sorts of things could be done. So I think there certainly is some mileage in terms of looking at that from different perspectives to see if we can make more progress in that area. I certainly think that's worth doing.
Could I ask you, I'm going to go back go back to what Mary was on about, the collaborations. We've got about 80 of them, I believe, isn't it? And the partners that you've got in SRS and you've got across the piece with people like the Health Authority, if we getting qualifications out of them, we're getting standards. I had a conversation the other day with somebody about the voluntary sector, and we used to excellence and stuff like that. If we've got, you also talked about general qualifications, standards and qualifications and general ones and specific ones. If we've got that in, and we've got the local service board in on the act as well, there's a lot of mileage in here, isn't there? The commonality is going to save people an incredible amount of money if they all have standard ones, I would have said. Obviously, you did say in the past when we've had you here about whether you get the things off the shelf or whether you do them yourselves. And obviously, there's a market in here as well, which was the other question. And we did pick that up a few times. We've had you on this one. It does sort of make sense if it's a local market, where we're getting these things from and whether everybody's agreed to as what the standards are. Is that enough for me to be going on with it?
No, I certainly think there's enough in there. I think it's also important that what was the one example I've quoted so far is the All Wales Academy, and that's an All Wales portal, so that's operating at quite a wide level. What we're also doing is some work with our neighbouring authorities in terms of, I mean, we do on occasions provide bits of training for them around health and safety things, and vice versa. They will provide us with certain types of things. But what we're also looking at across the HR and transactional HR areas are how the councils within the Gwent area can perhaps come together in a more collaborative way. And within that sort of scope, it would also include things like training and development. So we're certainly not shut in terms of our thinking to these things, but it's finding the right opportunities, the common ground, and being able to take these things forward.
Sorry, it's useful. Right, okay, next item is Kate and strategic equality plan. Would you like to do that one, Steve?
What is the outcome of the exploration work you've carried out into the mandatory equalities training for all staff?
Thanks for the question. We've got a number of voluntary equalities training that staff can engage in, but we are looking within my role to include some of the community safety stuff mandatory, the equalities things mandatory, and I've been meeting with the workforce development within social care, actually looking at the All Wales portal that we've just been discussing, just to see how we can kind of put these things and where it's best placed to put them on, how much it would cost, and just rolling that out. So it's just that kind of exploratory work at the moment to see basically how much it's going to cost, how we can implement it and things like that. So that's about the only stage that we're at.
Steve?
Excuse me again. Yeah, the point of the question is to ask when it's going to be done. Because if we have an open-ended answer of that we are doing this and all the rest of this, there needs to be timelines on when you're looking for an outcome at the end of the day. So again, what I would ask you, as I did in the previous question I asked elsewhere, can we put a time frame on, you know, when all of these inquiries will be finally made? If it's 1 month, 3 months, 6 months, 2 years, let's have some idea when we can expect then, because the question itself will only keep repeating itself all of the time.
Chair, if I could just come back with that to Councillor Brooks' question. This isn't just the local authority element; it's much wider than that on a regional basis. So it would be very difficult to put a time frame on this to any extent, because it just doesn't involve the council as part of this process. It's much wider.
I'll repeat the question again. Torfaen Council is what we are scrutinising today. Where will we be at in our with this? Like, you know, where will we be in our situation? Other people don't answer when they are asked in the collaboration and all that. Well, fine, that's fair enough, but because that is in itself an answer, and then we can identify who's holding things up.
I think I'm making an explanation. So what Steve's getting at is the outcome and outputs of what's happening. You know, it's a really nice piece of work in terms of where we are with the policy, but I think what wants to see the next stage on in terms of where we, you know, from the measurement, where we go with what's actually happening with the workforce. I think that's what he means on that one.
In terms of trying to take this forward, then Chair, there does need to be some decision making around who's going to take the decisions of whether these become mandatory or not. What I propose to do is that we'll come back to you within 6 months around what the next steps are and what mandatory provisions going to take forward. Okay.
Well, questions on the SROS, this particular SROS question, you'd be glad to know, but we've got some on the Welsh Audit Office one, so we'll go on to the next item on the agenda, which is report 2. So we start with Welsh Audit Office review of whistleblowing. Let me get my and that's on page 65. Everybody caught up with that? Right. And if we start with Mary, question number 1. Yeah. And that's for Graham and...
Action 3 states whistleblowing training should be provided to all staff and members. The update states the senior task force has received a brief. Can you confirm if training has been provided to all staff, not just senior managers? And this is very much linked to the last question, where it's about all the W's, you know, who, why, when, where, and what the expected outcomes are.
Face-to-face training has been provided to the senior managers. They've been charged with the duty of circulating it more widely. In terms of staff at all levels, then there's previously been announcements through Swoop and the policy and information provided and drawn to staff attention, and it is included for new starters to the council as well. In terms of face-to-face engagement with every single member of staff, no, that has not happened.
As a caveat to that, and perhaps the leader might be the best, or the deputy leader, as the leader has just had to leave, I hope that regardless of which political affiliation new councillors have, they will be aware, obviously, of whistleblowing and indeed how they must act with courtesy and dignity to staff, however annoyed they might be on certain occasions. We don't want a repeat of what's happened in a neighbouring authority.
Subject to Graham's confirmation, I think this actually now falls in my portfolio in any event from the 1st of January, but I could be corrected and I could be wrong. You will be aware from your past experiences, there is a induction process for new members, and this will be addressed at that induction process.
Are we, actually, what we picked up here, and it's no criticism really, it does actually need to be brought into some form of team meeting and actually recommended that everybody gets this. I think if you take, for instance, the school experience, where it's brought up at, say, team meetings or staff meetings or governance meetings. This is the sort of thing that's too important not to be taken down to the lowest level meeting, because I think it's just, there are things like health and safety that obviously has to go down to individual responsibility, and the rest of it should go down to that level. It's not just a case of going to senior management meetings. Is that a reasonable point to make?
It is a reasonable point to make. We've, as I say, circulated it in the broader sense. What we haven't done is take the temperature with staff to see what the level of awareness is. We plan to do that through the employee survey. We tend to focus on different areas each year, so we ask questions about dignity at work 2 years ago. Safeguarding last year, we were going to look at whistleblowing this year, and there is clearly an option that we can leave it, do the survey and then ask about awareness, or actually reach out to staff again and reinforce the communication undertaken so far, and then see what results we get through the employee survey. So we've got a couple of opportunities that we could take advantage of.
Thank you for that. Anybody else want any more comments, or have I made the comment right there? Thank you. That will be reflected in the minutes. So thank you for that, Graham. Next question number 2. Pardon? That may be covered. Okay. Thank you, Graham. That's lovely. The other item on the Welsh Auditor General's, that was Mary, no? Yes. No. All right. So it's the next one round. I will ask the next one round, shall I?
This is now shared resource.
So all right. We're shared resource.
And Councillor Davis asking questions.
All right, Councillor Davis, you can ask that one. Go on. I don't want to ask this question.
Yes, thank you, Chairs. There's three questions to ask about the getting into the SRS core report on page 78, the section on customer satisfaction surveys. I suppose the question is that how do we get more people to use them? How is the feedback used? And indeed, why have them in the first place?
Thanks for the question. We use the survey to try and judge the type of service we are delivering, so whether it's a good service or a poor service. We have seen numbers of people responding, so people log calls through the service desk. Every 5th call, a user survey is put out to the user to fill in. Unfortunately, the number of responses isn't a huge number compared to the number of calls and the number of surveys going out. How we do that going forward is a real challenge, because obviously we can only shape the service we provide if we've got feedback coming in from the users we service. So it is a difficulty, and we are pushing more and more now to self-service. So rather than having to ring up and log a call, users can access the call logging system themselves and actually log a call directly. Again, we would be asking users for feedback on that, but it'll be a different way of interacting.
To come back on that, and I know it sounds a ridiculous thing to say so, but is using the IT system for customers to measure customer satisfaction of an IT system a good thing? Is that actually maybe people how they look to an IT system is not to do that sort of thing? Is it maybe actually a better way is actually if maybe they had pen and paper, or indeed if you were one-to-one or in a round table group?
Yeah, and in the education work that we do, the education department actually send out a perception survey to schools, where schools will actually give their perception of the service they've had. So it's something different and different set of questions. I guess from a core service delivery, we do meet with groups of people, whether that's at management level or user level. We are trying to implement workshops with people. We have specific days set aside where we can go along and people can drop in and talk to us and get their issues resolved. But at the moment, the only real way of judging how good that service is by asking the questions, and the easiest way to ask the questions at the moment is through a short, sharp survey of a few questions to understand, is the service they had at that time, on that day, been a good service or a bad service?
Basically, it's suck it and see. Suck it and see, basically, at the moment.
Well, we're always open to developing the service, and I guess as we get more partners in and that help desk becomes bigger and we deal with more customers, we will pick up some of the better practices that may exist in other authorities. We're open to learning and to developing, and we will try and gauge how well we deliver the service. However, people will only log calls when there's issues, so we need to be targeting those people around, they've asked for a service, how has that service been for them?
Mary?
I don't want to teach you how to do your job. I mean, I was actually born in the pre-plastic age, so digital communications has very much been, over the last 40 years or so. It seems that you have an enormous number of queries, comparatively enormous, to do with password resetting. Now, it used to be that councillors had an email saying your password is due to be renewed within the next 2 weeks. We don't get that anymore. And I have been in member services when there's been a queue of people not able to log on because their password has been rejected. Surely, the simple email giving us warning should be enough. We're all capable of doing it from the icon, but it's forgetting that it needed to be done.
Okay, good question. All I can say is, at the moment, is I get the prompt. There's usually an on-screen prompt that says your password is due to expire within X number of days. We recommend you change that password. So,
We don't get that anymore. We used to.
okay. Okay.
We'll take that one away and we'll check that and let you know.
More questions? Nigel?
We've got two more. Again, on the SOS Public Board, as you go on to page 87, it talks about, with your, about the successful implementation of large-scale projects such as, I'm assuming it's not the NATO, but I don't really never know, iLearn Wales, Wisdom Bank and Menus Count, demonstrated through the KPI 3 project government and delivery. As I said, to talk about successful implementation, how do you define success?
Yeah, I would hope, thanks for the question, success would be in sort of a lessons learned forum. So once a project is completed, you normally meet with the customer and find out how that project was delivered. So sort of after NATO for once, we sat with Gwent Police and took lessons from that experience. I would hope that's happening with other projects as well. I think where we want to get to, we've recently had a slight restructure, and we've actually set up an area now that's going to look after governance for projects, and they're actually looking at their frameworks at the moment. So hopefully, I think one of the lessons we're taking from this is while we put effort around larger projects, we probably don't take the learning from the smaller projects, and they're looking at the whole thing in the framework to see where we can make improvements on that.
You okay? But no, not.
Yeah. When we're talking about again about these sort of things, are we talking in terms of budgets, or indeed are we talking in terms of, say, the project itself? Would you have said to somebody that they brought in this project and you have said, well, actually, how we see it, how you see it and how we see it, basically it can't work?
I think normally the benchmarks are around sort of cost, delivery, timeframes on time, and quality. So it's really a combination of those three things that we would draw out in discussion to see if that was acceptable or not. But you know, it's recognising, going back to my first point, I think we need to document that properly and put a proper framework in place. And that's what our project office is looking at the moment as part of the overall project governance going forward.
And is there any, looking at how these things have, say, progressed, say, a year on, 2 years on, 3 years on, etc.?
Do you mean sort of benchmarking previous years against where we are today?
Well, how these how these actual projects have progressed in their first year, their second year, their third year, using measures to show success.
Okay, I believe the projects have really sort of, once they've been finished, they're then looked at. So ongoing projects, you know, we have different project boards with Torvine, Gwent Police, Monmouth, and there's an ongoing evaluation of projects. Now they're progressing in those forums, but it's only at the end of the project, once it's been delivered, do we then have the post-project review session.
In many ways, it's the other bit linked to this. There's one on page 88, part D, when you say about partner organisations not providing input into the service level agreement process. What do you actually mean by that?
We're currently in a process of issuing commissioning documents for the organisations where they can specify the type of service they require, what they expect from that service, and some of the SLAs around that service. We did this process several years ago with Torvine, Monmouthshire and Gwent Police. We gave them a brief outline of what we required, and we had 3 very different documents back. So one was very detailed, very thorough in the type of service they wanted, to the other extreme where it was very loose and very not very distinct in what they wanted. So as part of the process now, and as part of the strategy and the work we're doing with the boards, we're reissuing the commissioning documents, and they're based on a Gartner template which is used across the world, to try and get from the partners the service levels, what's platinum, gold, silver and bronze, what needs to be out of hours, on call, what is standard in hours, so that we can build our service catalogue and our services around what the requirements are for the organisations.
Just one on that. If say, if say there was a partner organisation which operates, would you actually go out with that part? Say it was something like social care, for example. They wanted to do IT to help social care, and would you actually consider going out with the social care people and seeing what service that they needed to do their job?
Yeah, very much so. That's the type of engagement we want to get to with organisations, with departments within organisation and within teams within departments. We provide the IT services. What we need is for the customers, the departments, to engage with us around the type of IT that they want, how they can deliver transformation using that IT within their departments, within their teams. There's a wealth of technologies out there that we can use, but there is a process by which we must go through to ensure the safety of everybody else on the network. So we need to engage, we need to understand the vision of where they're headed, their strategy, what they want to do, how they want to do it, and then we can build the portfolio of work behind that that will help deliver that.
So does that mean you go down their work planning as building it into your IT? That was a question I actually asked before. I mean, it does strike me, because I hadn't seen it in here, whether you go down the Health and Wellbeing Act as well and things like that, because when we look at planning elsewhere, I mean, on the Cleaner Committee, you have to build that into Health and Wellbeing, and I presume you must do as well. I haven't seen it in this plan here, but...
On the first part of that question, our interaction with the departments, with the teams, is usually initiated by the team. So there'll be a requirement within the team, within the department. They'll come and speak to us, and then we'll start that process of engagement with them. With regards to health and well-being, I'm not sure I can answer that one at the moment. I can come back to you on that one. Yeah. I would have thought so. Yeah.
Any more members? Right. Anybody? I presume we've asked people to want to have anything. Anything, exec member, because you've been very quiet. Anything you'd like to add? What's that over there? Sure. Edith? No, it's great, lovely. I hope that was informative. Anyway, it seems to be very thorough over here. And anybody over there anybody up there want to add anything that you haven't said already? Well, you're more welcome to go. That's lovely. We obviously, I don't know what we're going to say. Thank you very much indeed for being here. So, yeah. Okay, I'm being a bit sort of. So we now got to sum up. I think with this one, there's no real recommendation. The actual Kath saying to me, what we've got to do is answer what it says. When I find it. Okay. The suggested scrutiny activity, which is repeated on the other end as well, is the committee is invited to review the impact of recommendations accepted and implemented by the executive relating to the committee scrutiny by scrutinising the impact, timescales and progress detailed in the resource business arrest and report.
Yeah, it's got all of that.
Got all that. So have we done it?
I think, well, the problem that occurs, I think, each time is that when we ask people to attend the scrutiny meetings, they seem to be unsure what sort of questions we're going to ask them. Because there's a clue in there straight away that we're going to be asking for timings and outcomes. And I think that I'm not blaming anybody here. I don't want anybody to be offended or anything like that. But at the end of the day, what we are scrutinising is that things that are in progress, where they are at, and when is there going to be an outcome. And I think that is clear and important. That's what we want to know. And we've been through a lot of questions. We've prepared the questions and the inquiries very carefully in a pre-meeting, but some of them, at the end of the day, it has to be said, we haven't really had any conclusive answers to. Now, what I would turn around and say at this particular point, because this will be the last meeting of this that I will be attending, and the thing about it is that there is a little bit of over the course of the last 5 years, there seems to be a similarity here, is that we can never seem to pin people down to deadlines. And for me, I think that there was something that was discussed where it had been rolling on, you know, for the whole of that time, but still not an outcome. So I think that for future scrutiny of such things is that, I think that at the end of things which are reported, there must be included in there an indication of a completion date. And then at least then you know what it'll always overrun. I mean, particularly in this business, things overrun anyway. But at least you can see how far it's overrunning. And I think that's what's come out of some of the questions asked in here. Yeah.
Well, mine follows on from that, because we are an overview. We are an overview and scrutiny committee, and whereas, you know, I think we always scrutinise, certainly as finely as all the other scrutiny committees, and perhaps more finely than some. I think with the overview as well, when we do give recommendations to whoever it might be, the officers or the executive member, on our ill ease or our pleasure or whatever, and make recommendations on how the way forward might be considered, we don't seem to get any feedback on that. All we get is how many recommendations were accepted, how many weren't, and a surprising number weren't, which is a shame because we don't make them lightly. Then I think we need more of a dialogue with officers and executive members on how seriously they actually note our recommendations and whether it does inform and change some of their forward work programme. I'm not convinced it always does.
What I would like to say is,
Thank you. I think the external funding one is an absolutely prime example. They looked at what we recommended. They decided that what we recommended was sensible, would assist them in their work, but they were not able to do it themselves. They needed SRS to make that step change for them to move forward. And whilst they said that it didn't really affect the way that they worked, in the sense that they had a good system that was up and running at the moment, but they accepted that what we were proposing would be better, would make them more efficient. I think there's two ways to look at this. Either we as a committee should be looking at a more homogenous approach to it, really, in the sense that it's no good making a recommendation to this committee that relies on two other committees to do, there's no point in making a recommendation to one department that relies on two other departments to agree to it as well. So I think that's something that hopefully, if I'm lucky enough to come back, I will take forward when I'm coming forward with these decisions and recommendations. But I think as well, as I said initially when I started to speak on this issue, particularly around external funding, if you were looking at this from the outside, it would look as if all these departments are going, yeah, that's great, well, you know, and then nothing is happening on too many issues. I mean, some of these issues on external funding have been coming back since 2014. Now, it may not be terribly important because, as we know, because of Brexit, I mean, I'm not sure what's going to happen to this whole area of work, but obviously, it relies a lot on European funding, which is highly unlikely to be there in 2 years' time. So, it isn't the end of the world that we haven't got anything around this. But I think as well, it does need to be made clear to the departments that if they are accepting one of our recommendations, they need to be able to accept it.
Can I add to that? I mean, I'm absolutely gobsmacked to, use a non-technical term, that nobody has got a ballpark figure on how much we will lose when European funding ends. I mean, I think there are more farms, for example, getting subsidies in my ward than any other ward in Torvine, for example, and that's just one thing. Yeah.
Most of it's already been covered. I would say that that there are still, again, it's my old bugbears, the fact that, as which a few of us said about everything, about the fact that everything needs to come together, and even though you could tell from Graham Russell's answer to my question about when he said about other organisations, but the thing is that they're all part of the local service board. He said, yes, I know, and that's the worst thing about it. And I think there's still that sense that there are that in this new world that there are so many different players which have been created for whatever reason. But the fact is that say bring in extra funds maybe to change certain ways of working. But the thing is that there seems to be very little connection. And again, the thing that Glyn said about the European funding could only take place is that, yes, we'd love to do it, but the other two departments won't play ball. And again, it's that old problem of communication that we still seem. Well, I hate to use that phrase, the word silo. I prefer to use the phrase that we live in a vacuum. That there's still that sense of that there can be too many vacuums about. Even though I know that in many other places that I've looked at through scrutiny, that these vacuums are being broken down. But there's still that sense that there is that problem, and that's I think my great concern is that there's still the sense of too many departments not talking to each other on the things that we need to talk about.
I was going to add that the on-Pacific pieces of work, I think we're okay. The stuff that hasn't come here is the bits of work we've signed off, a good example being a community farm, a good example being the bit of work that we did on energy, which is now under debate. Those bits of work we do fine because they're specific, they're like projects. That's okay, we've done it, we signed it off. What I think we're not good on and what we're frustrated with, and we've seen examples here today, are what I call process. And that's what you're frustrated by. And I think quite rightly so. SRS is one of the good examples. The European funding is another example. And I don't think you're ever going to be satisfied with that, to be honest, because it's something they're expecting us to comment on. We're not experts on the subject, but I think we can usefully comment on it. I mean, what gobsmacked me, to be honest, to use another expression that Mary, a bit like Mary was using, was that we made that comment in pre-scrutiny that everybody, on whistleblowing, for example, on all those processes that the workforce should know about. Now, it's not beyond, I don't know, we've all said we run various teams in various places. You make sure they know about it. It's essential. You have a meeting once a week, once a month, whatever. They know about health and safety. If you've got new policy coming, you sit it there. It's part of the meeting. I can't see that that's rocket science. It's just something we down at Randoms or CCYP or anywhere like that. You know about it. It's policy. You get somebody to sign up for it. That's not. This might be enormous, great bureaucratic machinery, but somebody needs to sign up about that. You've got a copy of that. Read it. Come back to the next meeting. Tell me what you know about it. How complicated is that?
I think we do suffer a bit from this illusion, to a degree, of the importance of Torfaen County Borough Council, in the sense that when I said to Graham, you know, we have a minuscule education department compared to what it was, and EAS are doing education for the whole of the Greater Gwent area, and yet we think, while we have in terms of legal responsibilities, overall responsibility for education, in terms of what we are actually able to do educationally, it's quite small. And exactly the same thing in housing. Oh, housing department's like 6 people or something now. It's you know, even minuscule compared to education. And yet we're not looking to Brynavan. We are looking to Brynavan to do for us. We're not looking towards Brynavan, I don't think, with the aspect that perhaps we ought to. Brynavan must be doing a lot of training for its employees. It's got an awful lot of employees. And they train in some of the areas that we have, you know, that we have need of expertise in. And exactly the same thing applies to EAS. There are members, there are officers working here who could benefit from training that is being done within EAS. And yet, because we've got this training arm of Torfaen Training, and because we have been the big boy in the valley up till now, I think we need to concentrate more in working with others rather than expecting others to work with us.
Steve?
Yeah, I think that particularly with the framework of housing and everything, I'm sure that everybody is aware that there is a brand new chief executive of Brynavan, commenced duties on the 1st of March. And there it is likely that there will be a change perhaps in some direction at Brynavan. We were talking in terms today here of the ability to communicate through the telephone system and difficulties that have presented themselves. And I think because we are involved in this, Glyn is right, it's an arm of us. But if anybody rings up Brynavan, there is just one person for which you've got to go through. One person. And it is, it certainly, shall we say, that something come to the forefront at the time of interview with prospective candidates. Like, you know, I have always found it astonishing that you can only ring one person and then that person's got to decide where you're going to be put through to and all the rest of that. Like, you know, hopefully we'll see some changes there. But I think the key to it at the end of the day is that there were some references made this morning at a meeting I attended about things like Facebook and all the rest of this. And we've got to live in the world where there are people who are never ever going to use those types of facilities, and even if they do, they will always still prefer to at the very least speak to somebody on a telephone. All of us know the frustrations. I was trying to register a new washing machine the other day. In the end, I gave up the ghost, and I found a telephone number for the said company. Much to my astonishment, rung the number, and some young lady in the Philippines answered the phone almost immediately. I nearly fell over, and did everything for me. So that is always going to be, it's always going to be needed there. We can't you take the surprise that was on the face of our officers there when they discovered that with regard to a simple thing like changing passwords, we, like the officers, all our officers receive through the communication system, your password needs to be changed. None of the elected members get that, although, yes, they used to. And then there's this astonishment that that's still not happening, and it's a little worrying.
Yeah, the number of issues that Steve has raised. One thing I'm going to certainly tell those who take over from John and myself in the ward, that what I do now with telephone communication, where you have that long message and then you have to press whether you want Welsh or English, and then rattling off this for that, that for the other, that might be fine if you're a councillor. It's not fine if you're a person who is not quite sure which department they ought to be getting through and doesn't particularly want to go through switchboard because you get sent all over the place. I actually now tend to tell people when they get in touch with me and they want numbers, I say, what you have to do is straight away press 2 unless you want Welsh, then this, and I tell them, repeat them so they hear it, and I make sure they understand what it is. Because a lot of them, and I get about 2 or 3 a week, who say, I just flung the phone down in despair in the end. I thought I'd come through to you because I wasn't getting anywhere. And that's just a simple thing, isn't it, that we can tell them, even if we have as councillors a little card saying, keep it by your phone, and if a member of the public phones you, this is their, options.
Could I get Kath to repeat back what general conclusions on this one?
While she's going to that, can I say, I think we owe thanks to our officers who must have spent their lunch hour typing up the questions. That was done very, very quickly.
So, Kath, just bring back general recommendations to Scott here. Out of all this that we've just said.
Okay. From what we've just said, I've written down, going forward, members expect that this time next year, more definitive timescales are documented to show an expected end date and an outcome.
I thought she'd come up with that.
Okay, then it needs to be made clear to departments that if they are going to accept a recommendation as a result of a meeting, then they need to ensure that they are able to carry it out as much as possible. Because obviously there are things that might happen afterwards that would stop it, but when they do accept it, it is with the intention of actually carrying that out. And then, I don't know if this is a recommendation or a comment, but still a sense of too many departments or partners that don't communicate with each other when delivering recommendations.
That's really good.
I have got some other things that you have mentioned.
Go on, put those in there, because I was gobsmacked about it.
It was the whistleblowing.
Yeah, whistleblowing one. Appalled me.
Yeah, I've got that recommend that this forms an agenda item on team meetings to ensure that all members of staff are aware of the whistleblowing policy. Yeah.
I think it's important councillors do as well. In a previous era, we all know the kind of councillors they thought they had to shout at officers every single day to put them on their phones.
But were said they were simple.
From a member's point of view, I think Councillor Clark said that that will be dealt with in the induction process going forward. So I think it's more the concern was the fact that only senior management had been trained on work on
You all said it in
whistleblowing.
pre, and I had to say it as chair. You all said it in pre, and I had to say it there simply, because and he agreed with it. So let's get on. Let's put that in the minutes.
Did you want it to be made a recommendation around the training side of the EAS and Bronavon? Do you want that documented as a?
That was a good
I
point,
wasn't
mate.
sure how. I've got it written down as a recommendation.
Yeah,
I wasn't
even
sure.
Graham
Yeah.
seemed to take it that I think it is this issue as we were the big organisation in town. We're not so big now, and perhaps we should be going to some of these bigger organisations such as EAS and saying to them, look, if you're running any courses on this or this or this, is there any chance that our people can join in, even if we've got to pay a bit for it?
Oh, that's a really good point. Can I also add the bit in about, I don't wish you brought in because I picked it up with the bit about about the local partnership board and the protocols across that, because that does, I think you brought it out and I picked it up. If we're going to collaborate, we might as well have protocols in place. No, it's the same again. Training and quality marks and all the rest of it, it's the same thing really. Because the health authority might be appropriate as well if they're in on it.
I think that the problems that we are, the things that we are seeing a difficulty with all organisations at the end of the day, is the time constraints under which they're all operating at. And with regard to the housing issues, there are cuts and all the rest of this that have occurred at Bronavon and at every other organisation. It's sadly, we are currently living in a world where the word and the thought is how things can be cut, because there seems to be no funds available at any level to increase what's being done, and in some cases to maintain it at the same level as it is today. It invariably always means that it's always going to be at a lower level. And then I can only imagine that people look at, well, ways and means of spending the money. I was a little surprised, I think as most of the members here were today, concerning how we work with the bigger members of the community like Bronavon and the like thereof. We'll use those just as an example. But it is so key and so important, because there are some levels here that we're at where we are now the smaller of the players, and it's to our advantage to collaborate and to work with these people, and I think that's got to be the way forward. And the other key thing is that it may be more economical, cheaper for those agencies to be able to provide for our needs at a much less cost.
Right, so let's get back through that. Let's see what we've got.
Okay. So we had the going forwards, members expect at this time next year more definitive timescales are documented to show an expected end date and an outcome. Needs to be made clear to departments that if they accept a recommendation as a result of a meeting, then to ensure they are able to carry it out as much as possible. A comment then, still a sense of too many departments or partners that don't communicate with each other on delivering recommendations. Recommend that whistleblowing be made an agenda item on team meetings to ensure all members of staff are aware of the policy.
Along with other council policies, because it's important that I think
with this one, because we're talking specifically about
whistleblowing,
we have to keep
that
to that.
Yeah. But there was the equalities work, was it? You got the equalities in there somewhere as well, because that was the other one that liked me a bit as well.
And then to explore further the opportunities for EAS, Bronavon or other partner organisations, PSB, etc., to make spaces available to TCB staff to carry out any training that could be used as joint training.
Could I just add to that? I mean, I think it's mind-boggling that when we have the service board, that they haven't carved up the training programme. I mean, what is wrong with saying, that police does all the equalities training, we do all the, ICT, or whatever it might be. Carve it up and that's it, because most of it's generic anyway.
It's called protectionism.
It's rubbish, isn't it?
Or empire building.
In fact, let's make that a point about what is it called? Let's make a point about this. The local service board ought to be a darn sight more proactive in some of these areas, because it's the obvious thing. We shouldn't. We had it. We. Look, we've noted the small schemes. Thank you, everybody, very much for coming.
Sorry, can I just...
I understand we can't do anything about the small schemes, and we're noting it. Can we make a recommendation to the Democratic Services Committee that they look at this issue about very large donations to charities? I mean, I don't know. I don't know who the Mayor's charity is this year.
Well, it's Teen Happen and it's Noah's Ark. They're all very worthy charities.
Yeah, but no. Yeah, and to give a small £50, £75 donation, I have no objection. But to give £1,000 of small schemes money to really out of out of the area, really, because Noah's Ark isn't. I mean, I know they accept children from this area. But
We put £500 into Kitty Away when they needed it.
Yeah.
Yeah,
I'm not.
Could you,
I had a problem in my ward the other day, and Anthony had to come down to meet with some people in the ward who are wheelchair users, and they were asking for more drop curbs. And I said, well, part of what I used to do with my capital money, because we used to get, what I used to do, every year I used to drop 2 curbs. You've got to drop 2 because you've got to have one on either side of the road, you know. But every year that was my first priority. I'd go and speak to some wheelchair users I knew, and I'd have 2 curbs dropped every year in my ward, and more if I could afford it. But we haven't had a curb dropped. I haven't had a curb dropped in my ward in 9 years.
Can we just go back to the agenda and officially note the member small schemes and go to the next item so we can finish the agenda for the webcast?
Well,
I put it in the minutes.
Could you actually, the other simple idea is actually members get a certain amount of training on what that money is used for. That's the way around it, yes.
We're new Parliament members, aren't we?
Yeah.
And advise them that really it isn't.
I've actually asked that, suggested that on a few things that members...
I think somebody mentioned it earlier on in the meeting regarding having a summary report as well attached to the member small scheme report, because they're unsure why it's actually in the agenda for as well, apart from being noted.
Yeah.
So.
Well, it needs to go somewhere because of issues like this one.
I mean, Standards and Ethics do point out actually we should automatically giving to the same group every year without, I believe, some kind of feedback, you know?
Can I say that those of us that are community councillors, which is all of us, not you, no you're not, no, but actually we suffer over the criteria given to local organisations, and in fact that's a similar kind of problem.
It's overcome at that particular level where the system in place does not allow you to make an award to an organisation that you've made it to this year, next year.
Okay, so can we draw a line to the webcast now at this point?
Yes,
Karen will obviously minute the comments that you've made, and that she'll take them on to the relevant people.
Excellent.